Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever the world you are today, we're trying to form a new way where we take everything we thought we knew and weigh it again to see how real it is. I'm here with Upcycle Club, also known as Harris from Greece, and we found that we share an interest in mushrooms. So this will be a mycogenetic I love how those words work. This will be an interesting discussion, and I'll bring Harris back up now, and he can say hello.
Hello, Doctor. Hello, everyone. It's a
And
pleasure to be here.
so, tell me more about specific mushrooms working to break down plastic.
Okay. First of all, I would like to make a small, tiny correction. I am from Cyprus. That it's another country that it's very well affiliated with Greece. So we share the same Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean basin. So
Okay.
now, regarding what you said, I do share general. I do share
Shall we invite the general to join us?
Ababa. Greetings. I have seen things. So I actually I am very well familiar with the work that is going on in what is called mycoremediation. That it's a particular branch of bioremediation that has to do with ways that we can utilize fungi and different, let's say, species of fungi. Like for example, there is one particular variety called Pleurodus. That is the commonly known as the oyster mushroom. So that particular type of mushroom and fungi can actually be utilized in order to break up some, basically the number one litter item globally. And I am particularly talking about wasted cigarette butts, that they are full with more than 18 different toxins. And it is an actual and very real hazard to the environment. And in case you are from, let's say, a country or a small nation or a coastal area that it's the same case as in my case, and your country is actually, let's say, based on what is called sustainable tourism. So if you have a lot of people coming here because you have very nice beaches and your beaches are full with cigarette butts, then the quality, let's say, of tourism goes down. And that's no municipality, no city wants that. So one of the things that we came up with in the context of a large integrated research project called Football, we created a pilot project back in the days where we came up with an ecological solution that it was a stand and made from marine plywood, where we had different, let's say, layers, 3 layers, where we installed there 100 different cones, that they were blue cones and created with recyclable plastic, and we offer those as ashtrays to the visitors of the beaches. So we pilot tested that, and it got very well, let's say, accepted in the pilot sites that we've tested. And then it quickly, over the next 3 years, it got replicated all over the island of Cyprus. So we started gathering a lot of um, wasted cigarette butts that basically we salvaged, because on that eco stand that we had attached a stainless steel bin on the side. So people, they were actually using it as they visited, let's say, the beach. And when they left, they actually went back there. They empty the ashtray inside this stainless steel bin, and then they place the ashtray back on the stand for the next person to use it. So it worked. It actually got accepted, let's say, as an innovative solution. It got particularly well accepted by the Blue Flag Association that promotes sustainable and clean beaches and coastal areas. And what we did is that we developed a system where a person with a small digital scale was going over these different points, let's say, that we had with the stands. And on a daily basis, they were emptying the cigarette butts. So we were actually had a long list of stats from the different regions, and how many kilos we managed to salvage from each different, let's say, city and beach. And this stat we provided back to the municipalities, and they actually helped them develop even more policies that they were help their branding strategies as sustainable tourist destinations. So this is what we did. And the second part after this project implementation was what do we actually do with the cigarette butts? So we save them from the coast. Is there any way to do something with it? And one of the things we did is, like, me personally, I sat down and I spent a lot of hours doing literature review, and I came up with 4 or 5 different ways that it can actually be done. And
see, if it was joints, we just smoked them until there was nothing left.
yeah, but because it has these filters, and
Yeah.
these filters has this, they are made up from this material called cellular acetosis. So what we realize is that one of the ways that you can bioremediate is with fungi. So you can train that particular type of fungi that I've mentioned before, the oyster mushrooms, to first to eat empty, clean, let's say, cigarette filters, and then slowly you introduce to the next generations the wasted cigarette butts. So you understand that this is a project, this is an idea, basically.
So you're basically modifying the behavior of the mycelium to cull out ones that can't handle certain types of chemical bonds that link up the cellulose links and cut it into easier pieces to be digested.
Yes. So we are actually
He asks if they're oyster mushrooms.
Yes,
You did say yes.
Yes.
But there's a lot of different mushrooms that do that. And mushrooms are all over the place, and they have their own intelligence network. So I'm convinced there's consciousness there. And I think that one of the roles that mushrooms play is that they're interspersed with dirt, and that they pass minerals back and forth between the dirt and the roots of plants. And so there's a whole process of breaking down stuff into a form where it can be exchanged for tree stuff that oozes out, and the mushroom can use that to put on mushroom mass and maybe break the surface in fruit. but we collected oyster mushrooms that were tree decomposers, and they were really, really tasty. And so there's no, the byproduct of having the mushrooms do the chemistry to break things down doesn't leave residuals of the junk in the mushroom. That
This is
stuff gets rejected into the soil. Go ahead.
actually one of the critiques that we had was like, but if you manage to create these oyster mushrooms out of the cigarette butts, yeah, will they be edible? And basically we said, okay, even if they are not edible, you can still use them for because there is a complete, let's say, almost complete decomposition, and you can use them as fertilizer. That's the list of the things you can do. But from what we understand, from what I understand, they are perfectly edible. So if that is the case, and doctor, please correct me here. I don't know exactly the actual process or the test that we have to do in order to try them out without any hazard to our health. So if we manage to perform tests and get some actual validation that indeed they are edible, that means we have closed the circle, and that's sustainable and resilient system where we can actually take it has positive impacts into the environment. So it's not only something that it's intelligent, let's say, but you can actually transform it to something better. So
Well, I think that intelligence in all scales is likely the same form of intelligence as we think we have, in that on mushroom scale, they have same sort of intelligence that we demonstrate because we're made of the same water, basically, which is holding the memories and being the intelligence. They just have a different form of structural work that works better on their scale, which is not really on our scale at all, except their hugest ones barely cut our minimum surface. So it's rather interesting. Grizz has been asking questions, and I want to field this one or let you field this one. Is there a connection between bioremediation and alchemy?
yes, and the reason is very simple in at least in my head, because alchemy it was a proto science. It was the mother of chemistry, as you know very well, doctor. So it all has to do with the art and science of transmuting, let's say, something that is toxic, in order to not use the, let's say, the dichotomy of words bad and good. Let's say something that is indeed everyone agrees that is toxic, like the wasted cigarette butts, and because they are toxic, they're full of all of those toxic elements, and create something organic out of it via an organic process that is called mycoremediation. So this is how I understand that.
Okay. I think that alchemy is one of those buzzwords that we better get a definition down. And to me, alchemy did derive down to chemistry, but was more a unification of all fields, so that alchemy had chemists and biologists and physicists, and all of them were supposed to agree, and mathematics would tell them what was right. That's kind of a big farcical way of looking at things when you get right down to it. And what I think is that individuals control their situations enough that if you want to smoke a few cigarettes or cigarillos or whatever you're smoking, My preference is joints, but actually, it doesn't matter because you get what you believe you'll get, no matter how it works. And so there's lessons to be learned in the path along the way. But if you know you can do something, you can do it. It's just a matter that there's a game afoot to throw roadblocks up for everybody. And so I am working on simple games and developing scoring systems so that as the games get more complex, we can figure out valid means of performance measurement without insulting people and having perennial winners and losers. Looked like you had something to say.
Basically, what you said before regarding the alchemy, from what I understand from my own research into it, it has to do with also with psychology. So it wasn't only the chemistry part or the product chemistry, but it also has to do with like a form of early psychology. And once again, I believe that is something that Carl Jung managed to pick up. And in many of his books, like in Man and His Symbols, he actually goes through that particular through line, let's say. So for historical purposes, I believe that the alchemy is one of the words that need to be salvaged and reclaim even, and then place into a good context because it often gets misused. So,
Well, we need a glossary that gives numerous definitions for the same words because the same words are chosen to be used and they convey different meanings to different groups of people. But the group theory that I'm working to establish sort of unites sociology and chemistry. And now we're bringing in psychology because figuring out why people do stuff isn't one of the things I like to do. But apparently, if you can figure that out, you can make all your saving throws. And so, anyway, I don't think the world works anything like the world as they tell us it works. But yeah, spiritual alchemy is exactly what we're talking about, Neutrino. And Grizz won't let me give out pluses for his show because it's his show. And there it is. We have the helmet come out. It
yes.
definitely looks like we're back into the questions of history and which narrative. And so, as the narratives go, it is my thought that somebody who dies and no longer has a role on this timeline, their consciousness goes out and becomes a Viking in 1100 Greenland. And it's funny how they named Greenland, which was a frozen waste, Greenland, and Iceland, which was a very green and nice place, Iceland, to just keep the tourists away.
That reminded me that United States, they supposedly used to be called Vinland. That actually means Greenland. So, and it was discovered by Vikings. That's how the lore goes. So, looking into alternative psychohistories there. Now,
We're going to have to take a lot of different related fields and work in groups of 2 and 3 to work out the nitty gritty that overlaps those fields because they're relevant to each other in parallel and they should all have similar principles if things are imagined the way I see them to be. And so people use terms like quantum and fractal. And it blows my mind because the meanings of those terms to me as a chemist mean something far, far different. And
Elaborate.
hmm?
Elaborate on that.
Well, when you get into chemistry, the model is protons and nuclei and neutrons in a nucleus
Mhm.
with electrons zipping about in orbitals. And this is basically your solar system model.
Mhm.
And the chemistry of how atomic orbitals work depends on where in the periodic table or how many theoretical electrons are in the outer orbital shell. And so when I take that idea, for a long time, I had pictures of what these orbitals looked like and no reason to question my pictures of how they worked. And so, from that sense, I could project to smaller units grouped in similar ways using symmetry principles. Symmetry has to do with things being the same and taking the same energy. So, in a resonance structure, they can share less energy to be fulfilled. And they have implications in everything from growing snowflakes to, well, we will speculate on that another time because I don't want to go down that path. If water has consciousness and if living systems exist on every scale imaginable, we as humans at this scale had better rethink things from planetary and galactic scale because it obviously isn't disorganized rocks in the stars and arranged stars to send us constellations that never change. But if you take astrology and astronomy as different perspectives of the same business, and the fact that we're in a construct and our learning environment should be to learn to construct constructs so that you, with your background, and me, with my background, can invite a third person into the room to share their background, and each of us gets a significant boost in what we know by coming to terms that it's all the same way, no matter which perspective we look at it from.
Yeah, because it's not just the Hegelian model of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's something different. This is two different perspectives, and then getting combined to have a synthesis. It's not that one is opposite the other. It's just they exist in different domains, and maybe at the end of the day, they have more similarities than differences.
A lot of the differences are caused by misusing terms that mean different things across the two ways you're speaking. A
Yeah.
nucleus to a cell biologist is completely different than a nucleus to a chemist. And when I say electron and electron orbitals, a physicist who might know that they've superseded that model and there is no such thing as an electron now has negated all the chemistry and biology built on electron theory. And so things have to be parallel at different scales. But one of the things I'm working on is when there's a big energy event at a single scale, how does nature disperse that energy using Fibonacci to make sure that there's incremental ratcheting in the direction of construction and building and creating life.
Okay, if you allow me a small comment here, I was talking with a very good friend of mine, my best friend, and he was going through our last two talks. This is the third one. So he really enjoyed them, which is nice to get some kind of positive feedback from a good friend. And one of the things he said was like he really enjoyed the what we said the other time regarding the Earth being a living organism, and that earthquakes are then the hiccups. So he made that actually, he took your perspective, my perspective, and he came up with something more. So this is something that personally I wanted to share with you. Why? Because it can be even further extended. So if we take that analogy, let's say, just for the sake of argumentation, we can then say, so maybe those hiccups or those earthquakes, depending on the scale, are actually following the gaps between each hic. They are following the Fibonacci sequence. So that's something, another hypothesis, let's say, that can even push this conversation a bit further. So that's just one of the examples that I wanted to share.
One of the things that I could see a need for after I had a conversation with a friend this morning is some sort of whiteboard programming that as we're talking, when we come down to an equation like PV equals nRT, or the golden mean ratio is a spiral growing in seashells, that we have visuals for it in a way of sort of the stock, lock, and barrel of the school system, in that you need an expert standing in front of a chalkboard or now a whiteboard, putting down what you need to know in a concise manner that allows people to assimilate without thinking. But really, you're not getting the education that you would if you were immersed in a problem and had to solve that problem in a fixed amount of time. And since we've got all the time in the world since I'm here, and I'm Dr. Lenny Time, and this is the new way where we weigh everything we thought we knew and see if it still holds up. And this is Harris Upcycle Club, and I want to thank you for producing the Dr. Lenny playing card, because in not really having talked to you much, you caught a word called flux. And it probably came because I used a flux capacitor in one of the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But in another different day and age, I had a card game called Flux.
Oh.
And the idea of the card game was that you had cards that changed the rules. And so the rules were always in flux. But if you knew the winning conditions, you could get them for a rule that wasn't in play. And then when somebody turns the card later in the game, aha, I suddenly win.
This is
It was
great.
a good card game, and I enjoyed many hours of flux with my children when they were young. My eldest son is now across age 30, and so it's just amazing the way we can have our outlook on life tell us which cards we get dealt. And it's funny because I'm watching people who, in a sense, are caricatures of themselves and not really thinking about things, but taking what they're told, repeating it, enough times that it seems as though they actually believe it. On the other hand, it's all an act, and we know it's an act. And when they need to do something, oh, let's kick the plea bargain deal that we gave to old Hunter and make that Joe Biden character squirm a little more. And that's the sort of stuff that I used to find somewhat entertaining, and now it crosses my I's and dots my T's.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that I at all want to think about the way that people will get here from there. But I do know that a lot of people that find the here aren't really going to belong here, but everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you, some of them just want to be used. But you know how it is. Rock music tells the story of life in its own genre. And when we can integrate rock music and philosophy and some of the art that humans are developing, but then again, human is another buzzword. And sometimes I wonder, do I really want to claim that I'm a member of this human race when things would not be played out the way they would be played out if I were a player in that game?
Okay, let me share my view there. I really liked what you said. So, from my personal story, I am coming from a different genre, that is the Gothic metal, and that's why also I'm into Vikings, let's say, and also into Jung, because Jung was all about the Gothic complexion, and it is interesting also in terms of perspectives and aesthetics and philosophy and architecture and whatever else. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to add is that a lot of people nowadays, as you said the other time, they are heavily specialized. They are specialists. Almost no one is going the other way around, that it's being the old way, let's say, of being a polymath. But if you go away from the universities and into the culture, let's say, you will see that no one of us is actually a specialist in their, I'm not talking about their professional capacity. I'm talking in our human capacity. So everyone is trying to learn as much as possible in an interdisciplinary manner. So that's something else that I feel that we need to reclaim, let's say. This attitude to learn things, to read things, to investigate, to explore, to be curious, to move away from the theatrics and the kayfabe, as they call it, and to be as original in your LARP or in your life as possible. So that's what I wanted to share at that point.
It's going to be very important to be able to mentally take yourself as a group of one and project each of us into larger groups as they form, while keeping that human perspective in the baseline. If you look at the way the current world works, it seems that larger groups are run by people that have larger egos, and that the size of the membership of the group sort of dictates how much policy that group can push out there. And I think that once a group gets big enough to hit the radar screen, it hits it with a thud and a thwack because everybody is protecting what they've already got, even though when you look at the system as it is, it isn't going to go very much longer. And if we have another system established that seems to work, we're a lot farther along when it does collapse because we know how to create our own value. And a lot of the value that I see us creating in the next year or so is entertainment with an introduction to a learning experience. And then after that, in-depth learning experiences where we take some of these problems that we know exist across different fields and we try and unify the fields in perspective to be able at least to evaluate theories of what the one is as far as size of the large scale, but one on a small scale at this moment seems to be very well defined by Planck's constant. And if it ain't broken, do not fix it.
Yeah. Leonard, Professor Leonard Saskin, he recently said that whatever we just need H bar. So that's something that actually I believe in it because I can see it in let's say in theory there, and I have this feeling that maybe we can even validate that in practice. If we can come up with a nice experiment that is testable and verifiable or even falsifiable. And going back to the very beginning with the mushrooms, there is and the cigarette butts. The reason that I came up with this, let's say, desire to communicate this with the village, that is the Broken Clock Tavern, and with you, Dr. Lenny, is because I think after watching that video that Chad shared from Robert, how they call him, Sheldrake.
Right.
Yes, I really believe that we can utilize this as a new test, as he was saying in that video. And the test is very simple. If we start, because this experiment with the mushroom is going for the last decade, not only from me, it happened in all across the globe, from Mexico to the Netherlands, all the way to Australia. So it is something that it keeps on going in small scale. My idea is the following. Remember what I told you, that we train the mushroom, the oyster mushroom, firstly to digest the clean cigarette filters. So if he's correct, that person, if his theory is correct about resonance, that means that eventually there will be no need to even train them, the mushroom. We will just be able to just give them directly the wasted cigarette butts and not the clean ones, and they will be able to do it. So that's the test that I came up.
See, what I envision is that now, in another realm of consciousness, I am a mushroom. What is my function as a mushroom? Well, I'm supposed to move stuff from the ground into a tree and take what the tree provides back and do other things. Okay, my guests just got here, and so I have to log out, as we said before. But it's been good to talk to you, and we'll continue this conversation later. Thank you, one and all. Dr. Lenny Time, timing out.
Right.